Hey, welcome back to Starbound. Before we get into today's video, please quickly check below to make sure you're subscribed. It's absolutely free and allows you to never miss one of our videos. The tropical planet of Vargas lay in ruins. Its many aberice patties were reduced to acres of smoldering, stagnant wasteland. The kelp forests that once adorned every tract of shallow sea floor were likewise ruined. Once economic powerhouses that fed billions across human space, they were now rendered too polluted to even enter, let alone eat. Despite the carnage, the Earthlings had the Zumu's invaders on the ropes. Their ships in the system had been swept away by the United Terran Star Fleet, like a tempestuous solar flare. In a complete reversal of fortunes, the hosts of Zumu's crone were sent packing into the jungles and seas of the agri-world, becoming akin to the very guerrillas they had spent months attempting to root out. Rather than the flat, decentralized command structure of their local human counterparts, the Zumu still stuck to their strict hierarchy, or at least what was left of it. To their delight, UTS planetary assault regiments regularly found Zumu's resistance cells with only their swords left at their disposal. For the Xeno invaders, morale was an inexhaustible font. Supply, less so. Together with local Varangian regiments folded into their command, UTS shock troops liberated continent after continent on the agricultural world. But there was an incongruity. High-value Zumu's targets, nobles, commanders, even fighters of particularly fearsome metal, kept disappearing. Usually, they would be conspicuously absent upon the defeat of a Zumu's warband, either missing from the list of the dead or detained. When questioned about it, their fellow braves would refuse to speak, even upon pain of death. They kept no written orders. All ciphers and directives died with the last brave to hear them. The potential whereabouts of these targets was only uncovered when UTS elements surveilling the planet from orbit detected a transponder signal offshore. Upon further inspection, it belonged to a civilian submersible, another incongruity. Intercepting it with a submarine of their own, UTS found a craft filled mostly with bureaucrats. Among the Zumus, these functionaries constituted more of a caste or a state than a mere job. In exchange for becoming eunuchs, they were entrusted with the day-to-day administration of Zumu's holdings that the warriors and nobility thought unbecoming and boring. They largely lacked the devotion that their intact counterparts had, singing like canaries when interrogated. Whether out of a lack of hope or perhaps a wish to be spared whatever treatment humanity had for their ilk, they revealed the location of the last bulwark of the All-Zumu's Accord on Vargas. Built deep underwater in the depths of the planet's world ocean was a nigh impenetrable vault. It was originally designed by a powerful agri-corps to house trade secrets, as well as copies of some of the most sought-after engineered seeds in the galaxy. But this purpose had been superseded by the alien occupiers' needs. The Zumu's host on Vargas had converted the vault into a bunker, from which they now had run the brutal occupation of the planet safely under miles of ocean. Now, it was where the invaders ran their crumbling campaign of defense in depth. It was where the occupation's top brass resided, among whom Lenazeth could be counted. Clan Princess Lenazeth despised mercenaries. To her, theirs was one without parallel. In their perfidy, in their dishonor, and in their despicable countenance. They reduced warfare to a mere good or service to be bought like any other. They had no honor to their name, nor loyalty to anything higher than their base passions. She gnashed her teeth at the very thought of them. But in a rare circumstance for the honor-bound Zumus, the hiring of mercenaries was deemed permissible for the protection of the Vargan seed vault. And, seeing as she was the commander of this current garrison, they were now Lenazeth's problem. Although the mighty Zumus could garrison the interior of the vault just fine, the outside was another matter. This is where the mercenaries came in. Hardy scum from an ocean world that had long chafed under the vassalage of the All-Zumu's Accord. Their race's true name had been long lost to time, but their Zumuzish moniker instilled fear across the galaxy. Kra or Nuth, or Brine Devils. They were used to the high-pressure environments of deep oceans, beyond the penetration of sunlight. They did not need environment suits to survive the depths of Vargas's seas, whereas other sapients would have been crumpled like cans under the ultra-thalassic pressure. Foregoing the Zumu's standard energy weapons, they opted for harpoon launchers tipped with nerve agents, as well as tridents for close-quarters battle. Primitive as their armaments were, their stellar combat record could not be argued with. Thankfully, Lanazath did not have to share lodgings with the fishy fellows. Their two species biologies were not able to coexist in the same room without one or both becoming a mangled heap of distended or crumpled flesh. Indeed, she did not have to share her lodgings with anyone but her loyal consort, Imalash. He was a clanless brave who had been hand-chosen by her house to be her personal bodyguard. Their relationship was not entirely licit, but within the Neocrete confines of the vault, no one dared address her indiscretion. She was the highest-ranking officer on the planet, after all. In fact, she was not merely an officer, but a noble woman. The bunker may as well have been her palace, the planet her ever-diminishing fiefdom. In the social calculus of her underlings, what she did with Imalash was simply not worth risking the ire of her house over. But the officers found plenty else to crease their scales at.
For a bunker surrounded in water, the stuff tastes awful in here. Even through all this seasoning, our rations still taste of metal and mildew.
Yeah, this must be what prison is like back home on Crone.
Oh, by the ancestors, hush, the princess is coming. Be quiet.
Indeed, she could be heard before being seen. Her jewelry clanged like a shirt of old Terran chainmail. The sound of her gait, the rhythm to which her manicured claws clacked along the vault's floor, was committed to the memory of all present in the officers' mess. It usually preceded dressing downs and chewing outs of epic proportions. Or worse. But strangely, the princess seemed serene.
Good day, men.
Princess Lanazath greeted, followed by a languid yawn that revealed a mouth filled with bespoke, shiny metal dentures. An aesthetic installation rather than a medically necessary one. If one was so brave as to pry them from her maw, they could easily fetch hundreds of thousands of credits. Not that anyone would be so foolish. Even among her ilk, considered tall among sapients by galactic standards, Lanazath towered above her peers. Owing to her royal pedigree, she stood at 10 feet in height, whereas the average Zumuz was about 7 to 8 feet on a good day. She had to take great care to duck in order to avoid concussing herself on the bunker's door frames, as they were built for human specifications. Far from dainty, her presence was a domineering and oppressive one. One of the officers before her, Commander Gotrar, stood up and bowed to her. "Good tidings, Your Highness. We have your daily report ready, and your breakfast." Sure enough, both were wheeled out before her in short order by an apron-clad brave. Upon the cart's top shelf lay 2 sad-looking bowls of gruel sprinkled with raw, shredded fish, as well as a box of human-manufactured tablets of orange concentrate to be dissolved in her cup of water. The latter were an unlikely favorite of the Zamuz, who took a keen shine to Terran sweets and sours. Their armies typically went straight for the stores and pantries of human settlements they conquered, and emptied them rapaciously. Beside these, a well-worn data tablet with her compiled report sat in standby mode.
Thank you, Gotrar,
Princess Lanazath said, acknowledging her underling. She made a vague, circular gesture with an unsheathed claw.
Imalash and I will be returning for lunch. Do try and tidy up a bit around here.
Gotrar bowed deeply once again. Yes, Your Highness, straight away. He picked up a broom and watched Lanazath walk back to her quarters with the cart pushing brave in tow. Once they had disappeared behind a corner, he muttered and shoved the broom into the hands of a eunuch bureaucrat. You heard the woman. Go on now, he growled. The functionary complied, pulling himself away from his number crunching and working away at the fine patina of dust that had settled onto the room's floor.
After the brave wheeled the cart into her quarters, Princess Lenazeth put her hand on his shoulder. With a gentle but firm grip, she ushered him out of the room. "Thank you, soldier. You may leave now," she whispered. Shutting and locking the door behind him, she turned on the lights, revealing a sleeping Imalash. Smelling the chow on the cart, Imalash pulled himself from his slumber. Though the table in their quarters was built to be sat around, he kneeled before it to negotiate the size difference between the humans it was designed for and the Zamoos who now commandeer it. It was covered in books and scrolls, which Imalash buried his snout in with regularity. Despite being a warrior of incredible prowess, he was uncharacteristically bookish for a brave. He dealt with the drudgery of bunker garrison life better than most in the vault, owing to his nearly monk-like countenance. Princess Lenazeth took out her bejeweled grill and tossed it lazily onto her bedsheets. Imalash cleared the table of reading material, and the two began to eat their rations in the dim light of their ad hoc living space. Though the romance between the two burned strongly, they found less and less things to talk about with each passing day. Imalash had already read everything he could get his claws on, and Lenazeth didn't even bother reading her daily reports anymore. These collated works rarely said anything new. From a cursory glance, today was no exception. The pair dined in companionable silence, accompanied only by the faint buzz of the overhead lights. Perhaps in a bid to spark some smidgen of conversation, Lenazeth took a tablet of orange concentrate with two painted claws. It snapped in half part way to the bowl, and she swore slightly as she struggled to pick up the crumbling sweet ration. It broke into more pieces, staining her claw orange. "I wouldn't advise that anyway, love," Imalash uttered, closing his eyes and focusing on masticating the now cold pottage. "Tried it once. Didn't care much for it." The princess frowned, looking at the crushed remains of her orange concentrate tablet in resignation. "Just the once, and you gave up." Imalash nodded, though he did not try to meet her gaze. Sometimes once is all you need." He tapped a finger against his brow before continuing. "It's a sound lesson to commit to memory." "And I shall." Lenazeth nodded, continuing to glower at the remains of her orange tablet. The Kra or Nuth mercenary garrison camped like vagrants outside of the underwater bunker. A few thousand strong, they huddled inside of lean-tos made from depressurized vehicles that had been abandoned outside of the seed vault. Though most swim-walked around with their harpoon guns, a few manned larger stationary gun emplacements camouflaged with dead coral. These fired shaped explosives and were to be used on human interlopers should they ever reach the frigid depths of the makeshift command center. So far, none have been encountered. The captain of these mercenaries, Sicthus, observed the latest arrival to the vault. Rather than descending from above, the submarine emerged from a thicket of coral like a predator stalking its prey. Sicthus swam over to his console and pinged the craft to open communications. No response. Furrowing his scaly brow, he pinged the craft again. No response. His lieutenant interjected. Though incapable of true speech, the Kra or Nuth had a quite sophisticated method of signaling each other using their natural bioluminescence. In a flash of lights, he called out to Sithus, "Should we put the company on alert? The metal beasts usually respond after being hailed twice." Sithus nodded, responding, "Yes, all hands on deck for possible incursion. I'll tell Their illuminated conversation was cut short by a terrible shrieking noise. It was metallic and grating, and caused Sithus and his lieutenant to recoil in pain. They had gotten off easy. Closer to the UTS submarine, curious Kra or Nuth mercenaries approaching the craft were instantly killed by the sonic wave from the submarine. Further away, mercenaries began to bleed out or claw at their heads, their innards hemorrhaging upon being hit by the sonar. Sithus heard stories about the Zumus using similar tactics during their invasion of the lower warrens of the Kra or Nuth homeworld, the last pockets of resistance standing in the way of total Zumu's victory over their people. Entire villages were condemned to painful death by the deployment of sonar. When news of the proliferation of the dirty trick made its way to Zumu's crone, the clans demanded the immediate execution of all involved for concocting such an affront to the honor of the Zumu's race as a whole. For the first time ever, the Zamus actually apologized for one of their many atrocities. Who could now be so barbaric as to repeat such sordid history? Sithus pushed the question out of his mind and grabbed a launcher resting on a nearby rock, preparing to take down the submarine himself if he needed to. The sonar operator took his earphones off, clutching his face in disgust. That was fucking dirty, Corpo. We're not doing that again. A man in business attire put his hand on his shoulder, slipping a preloaded charge card into the operator's pocket. Here's to hoping you don't have to. Your cooperation is appreciated, bud. He patted the now heavy pocket with 3 fingers, continuing, There's enough credits in there to make it worth your while. Don't go spending it all in one place. Unburdened by the morals and sentimentality of his UTS peer, Largo Lim left the tech to his own devices. He may have been a civilian, but he was every bit as vicious as any planetary assault trooper one could find. He was head of an acquisitions and repossessions team at Gohana Interstellar Nutritional Holistics, LLC, a powerful agricorp that was once considered the premier power broker on Vargas. Though the company had survived the Zumu's invasion, much of its assets had been destroyed or commandeered by the Draconic Braves. It was his job to tag along with the UTS liberation efforts and secure any and all Gohana assets on the world. For the task, he had at his disposal many thousands of corporate security operatives. In particular, he hand-selected 100 of the most ruthless to accompany him on this last mission of his, to secure the Vargas seed vault ahead of the main UTS offensive. Officially, he and his dozens of men were doing a team-building exercise somewhere in the jungle, and the submarine was on a reconnaissance mission. It had taken many hundreds of millions in credits, but Lim had bribed enough officials to gain passage on the submarine. Largo made his way to a room adjacent to the submarine staging area, which was already filled with water and being slowly pressurized to match the water outside of the vessel. His requisitions operatives were all inside of smaller submersibles, which were armed to the teeth and armored heavily. They were attached to the submarine and bore UTS liveries, but for this mission were crewed entirely by Gohana employees. The many computers before Largo displayed live feeds from the submersible's interiors and exteriors, as well as of body cams. The footage would be wiped after the operation, of course, but it was crucial to have now. Mr. Lim opened video communications with all of the submersibles simultaneously. His own feed appeared on a wide screen inside each vehicle. He cleared his throat and began to speak. Remember, men, you are here to grab as many assets as you can and to destroy the rest of the facility. Eliminate any and all resistance. We cannot afford to have any witnesses. Do I make myself clear? The men all gave a thumbs up towards the camera before returning to checking over their weapons. Good! Remember, this will be on your performance reviews. I need you in and out of there as soon as possible, or I'll personally see to it your vacation hours are deducted. Before you ask, no, this does not count as overtime. He let the grumbling elapse before continuing. Execute this successfully, and I see great things in your futures. Maybe even C-suite. Who knows? Largo cut his own video feed and took to watching his employees on the video cameras. He leaned forward with his eyes glued to his screens and his arms folded like the trusses on a bridge. Then a thundering boom rocked the vessel, causing him to fall out of his chair. He got up and pinged the bridge, shouting at them. What was that? I thought you sonarred them. Evidently we missed a few, came a tinny response on a speaker. We're cutting off your radio. We need quiet on the bridge. Do what you need to do, civilian. We're leaving now so that we don't get blown to shit by these aliens. Largo grumbled, slamming a fist onto the desk as his line was cut. He refocused on the submersibles, who had left the submarine and were now opening fire on any Kra or new targets they could acquire. The noiseless battle was occasionally interrupted by dulled explosions rippling through the water, followed by the video feed cutting out. Focus fire on their stationary guns. Don't let them get any more shots off, or the damage is coming out of your salaries. Largo barked, watching another one of the submersibles get obliterated by the shaped charge on the tip of a harpoon. They moved too slowly for the craft's active defense systems to target them. Another explosion rocked the UTS submarine, and it began lurching forward to leave. Ping us when you're ready for exfiltration, boys. Largo over and out. Sithus, what is going on out there? Princess Lenazath and her top officers, as well as Emma huddled around a console of their own. They could hear the explosions outside as dull rumbles reverberating through the vault, and saw only open ocean on the other end of the console. Then Sithus returned to view, loading his launcher with a fresh harpoon. He set it down briefly and typed to Lenazath, "Can't talk. Under attack. Prepare for contact with human bogies." He shut his console off, leaving Lenazath staring at a blank screen. "Oh, that little... I can't believe it. He hung up on me," she pouted. Emma checked over an energy rifle he had in his hands before loading a fresh cartridge into it and slapping the side of it. "We have bigger fish to fry. We need to get ready for them to breach the vault." Princess Lenazath nodded, withdrawing a ceremonial blade from a scabbard on her hip. "Indeed, we need a gun or sword in every hand, even the eunuchs." She turned to some officers of hers, who were watching carnage of eschatological proportions unfold through cameras on the exterior of the seed vault. "You heard me, sirs. Go dust off your rifles and tell your men to do the same. I want every last person mustered and dug in for combat within a quarter hour. Go! The human scum will pay in blood for every inch of this bunker they take." Lenazath and Emma took off down the hallway, locking the door of their quarters and barricading it with their table. "It won't keep them out indefinitely, but it should give us some time to light 'em up," Emma commented, propping up his rifle toward the entrance. Suddenly, a confused look impressed itself onto his face. His maw opened slightly, as if he was pursing his lips. "I don't get it. Why didn't the humans just blow the vault up with their submarine? Or with their submersibles?" Lenazath sat down beside him. "Well, if they wanted to simply destroy the vault, they probably wouldn't have even bothered with a submarine. They have nukes and depth charges and stuff." She pinched the top of her snout, contemplating the matter deeply. "If I had to guess, they want whatever's in here. We just happen to be on top of it." Emma nodded, giving the matter an equal amount of deep consideration. "Maybe. Or maybe they want to capture you. Surely they realize by now where and by whom the shots are being called." Lenazath shuddered. She'd rather die honorably than be delivered into the hands of savage human captors. She'd seen enough of the Vargan world net to know what manner of perfidy occupied their monkey brains. "If we had any explosives, I'd have half a mind to blow the airlock so they can't depressurize and come in here." "That's no Zumu's way to face destiny," Emma chastised. "Besides, that would mean we can't get out. Surely we wish to do that eventually, no?" "With our shield or on it," Lenazath declared, giving her chest a firm beat. It was a human expression her dearest consort had learned in his erudition, which she took a shine to. Her personal console chimed, and she trotted over to it. She unsheathed her claws to type on it. The keyboard was built for smaller fellows than her, and she found this a suitable workaround. On its screen was one of the eunuchs, one of the few dedicated to watching the video feeds around the clock. "Your Highness, the Kra Onuth have been routed, and the humans have entered the vault's depressurization chamber in the submersibles." "How many are there?" the princess inquired. The eunuch ventured a peek at his screens, mouthing a count to himself before trailing off. "Hard to say, but we should be able to repel their attack. There can't be more than 100 of them, judging by the size and quantity of their fleet." Lenazath gave an affirmative dip of her head. "All right. Get the hell out of the comms room and tell everyone else there to do so as well. Remember when we played hide and then also seek as a morale-boosting exercise?" The eunuch shuddered, clacking his teeth together. "Yes, Your Highness, that was the scariest hour of my life." As it should be. The hunted should never not fear the hunter, especially ones as formidable as we. Prince Lanazath chuckled, a deep sort of heaving noise for her kind. Go to whatever hiding spot you used during that and waste any human that dares stick his neck out before you. The eunuch saluted her and cocked his small energy pistolero. Yes, your highness, I will not disappoint you, he shouted, scampering off out of view of his console's camera. Largo fidgeted with his lapel, absent-mindedly muttering to himself while he clicked through his men's body camera streams with frenetic pace. He settled on one, Agent Stevens, who had been reassigned from accounting after a Gohanna intern pulled his combat sim and fitness records on a lark. He was a favorite of Largo's, since he always reloaded his submachine gun in the most fuck-awkward ways known to man. The slick corpo cleared his throat and pushed a button on his microphone. Talk to me, Stevens. You find any Zumus yet? Negatari, Largo. Just a big mess. Stevens responded, sifting through stacks of documents. He pushed aside a particularly massive pile and unveiled a brave waiting with a plasma grenade in his hand. Shit! Super Commando! Gotrar snarled in heavily accented Occidental Vargan before clobbering Stevens upside the head with the grenade. The brave seemed to shrug off the pain of the impacting bullets even as his torso wept blue blood. On his third strike, it detonated, cutting the feed from the requisition officer. Largo Lim winced, straightening his posture. War really was hell, as was whatever the hell one would call the situation he was sending these men into. Note to self, don't cheap out with the 9mm when dealing with these smog-looking freaks, he uttered, before tabbing through more feeds. He felt the cold steel of a gun's barrel press against the base of his skull. Without hesitation, he slowly raised his hands. Easy, easy, I ain't resisting. The United Terran Starfleet MP, one of many that had silently entered the room, sneered. I almost wish you would, punk. On behalf of the United Terran Starfleet, you are under arrest for sedition, misappropriation of Starfleet material, and bribery. Oh, come on. We had a deal. Name your price. All your friends are on the take. Go be like them, Largo yapped. Instinctively, his hand went to the prepaid charge cards in his pocket, but the cocking of battle rifles made him withdraw his hand, like a child touching a hot stove. Tough crowd. The sonar operator walked into the room, flashing a badge at Largo. Agent Marley, UTS Internal Affairs, undercover. We've been monitoring your corporation's activities in this system, and we are not happy. You will stand trial on Earth for your crimes, as will your little contingent. He smirked, pulling out a stun baton. Well, what few of them are left, anyways. You bastard, we have to turn this thing around for exfil, Lim spluttered. His nigh inexhaustible font of swagger had suddenly run dry. I mean, come on, they're humans. You can't just maroon them with those scaly-backed freakazoids. We'll rescue whatever survivors we find when our team secures the facility, Agent Marley reassured with a voice of cold steel. Wait, your team? Largo Lim asked, astonished. Since when did UTS authorize an attack on the seed vault? I'm afraid that stuff's on a need-to-know basis, Marley answered. He clasped a set of handcuffs onto Lim and gave him a tase in the buttocks to get him moving more quickly to the brig. Come on, you're corporate. You know how these things go. Boy, do I. Largo growled, shuffling forward and complying with the prodding. UTS troopers, having deployed from their own submersibles dropped from orbit, moved through the unsecured exhaust shaft of the seed vault. The explosions and resulting concussive blasts from the preceding battle outside of the deep-sea bunker threatened to depressurize their route of attack, but the neocrete walls of the shaft held up surprisingly well despite their cut-rate corporate construction. Upon reaching the end of the shaft, their squad leader initiated a transmission from his radio. Sword Ground Actual, this is Meat Man. Come in, over. Crackling Meat Man speakers to life, Agent Marley squawked back from the submarine. We read you loud and clear, Meat Man. Report. Over. Meatman's contingent brought forward a large drill and set it down before him. He ran a gloved hand over the door, feeling the lock.
Ready to breach the vault. We just need your go-ahead. Over.
Copy. Don't cook my drill, Meatman, and don't let me find out you stuck it into some poor brave. Over and out. Meatman chuckled. Before his men picked up the drill to pick the lock, he held up a finger to signal for them to pause. He took out a marker and wrote on the drill, Spork. He put his hands on his hips, admiring his handiwork before slipping the marker back into his pocket.
We'll see about that, Marley.
Meatman snorted before giving the directive to two troopers to open the door. Negotiating the awkward angle, they managed to rip up the lock, letting them part open the door with a heave. Once they were all inside, they welded the door shut and collapsed the shaft remotely. The door made a deafening shunk, deforming and bulging outward, but not opening. Meatman sucked some air through his teeth. Despite being a grizzled vet, he still jumped at the noise. Well, that's terrifying. He had seen far too many videos demonstrating the power of undersea pressure changes on crabs and fish wandering too close to pipes to not be instilled with the fear of the stuff. Halt, human! Shakily, a eunuch Zumuz pointed his energy pistolero at the UTS troopers. He emerged from a pile of crates labeled with Gohanna's floral logo. The blaster's tip moved between the troopers. He seemed to be reconciling the size of Meatman's contingent with his cartridge's low capacity in real time. Meatman turned his universal translator on. Instinctively, the eunuch did the same. Stand down, civilian. We're authorized but not obliged to kill you. Don't think I won't, disgusting ape. Suits me. Meatman reached into his holster and, with a flick of his wrist, placed 3 warning shots into the eunuch's chest, grouped as tight as a grapefruit is wide. The Zumuz's tattered bureaucratic vestments became stained blue, and he fell to the ground, clutching his breast. The troopers readied their arms and filed into the corridors of the bunker. Sporadic bursts of gunfire rang out from the upper levels, indicating there were still Gohanna and Zumuz elements present. Though the diminishing frequency of the gunfire seemed to indicate that the requisition team was not faring well against the alien garrison. Meatman snapped his fingers, drawing the attention of his men. Gosling, De La Cruz, on me. Everyone else, secure the reactor and sweep out from there. Kill all Xenos and detain all non-UTS humans you find. Wordlessly, they filed up the stairs and made a beeline for the power room. Gosling and De La Cruz remained with Meatman. What's the play? De La Cruz asked, watching the last of the troopers turn the neocrete corner of the stairwell. Meatman pointed at Spork. You two, grab the drill. There's a detour we need to make. The 3 crawled their way through the facility's winding ducts. A chopped-up pool noodle and some electrical tape was all that was keeping Spork from loudly scraping on the flimsy metal. This it? Gosling messaged Meatman on his PDA. Meatman dismissed the notification with a wave, returning the schematic of the seed vault to the display's fore. He was dead reckoning their location, pinching and panning along the wireframe model until he was satisfied. Probably. Only one way to find out, Meatman typed back, withdrawing a screwdriver from his belt. Before he could try to unscrew the vent, he dropped the tool, resulting in a loud clang that echoed into the room below. After a few seconds, a burst of shots ripped through the duct from below. Thankfully, the resulting holes only materialized in front of Meatman, and not behind or underneath him. Imalash let out a roar that lasted a full 12 seconds. The 3 human troopers clutched their ears, which rang within the confines of the air vents. Come down and fight me like a man, filthy human. I throw down the gauntlet before you. Imalash shouted, slamming his fist on a metal panel for emphasis. In the name of the Honorable Princess Lenazeth, I challenge you to a duel! Thinking on his feet, Meatman crossed the grate. Like a cat, he contorted his body to turn around and peered through the bars of metal. It's a far drop. I'll need you to catch me, feeble human biology and all that, Meatman said. Meanwhile, he typed on his PDA, drop Spork on Big Boy's head when I give the signal. What's the signal? De La Cruz responded. Perspiration beaded on his forehead and fell audibly onto the ducting metal. "I'll kick the duct. You can't miss it," Meatman replied. "Pay attention."
Oh, by the ancestors, fine! Stay there!
Imalash pushed the table under the duct and stepped onto it. Getting his footing, he removed the grate with his claws and his pure, unadulterated strength. He let it clatter to the floor as a crumpled piece of scrap. Placing his hands inside the duct, he hefted himself head first into the opening. With his claws extended, he grabbed onto Meatman's face. Imalash's large hands nearly enveloped the human's head entirely. The brave grinned and spoke coldly.
There you are.
Meatman frantically kicked the side of the air duct. Before he could turn around to see, Spork was revved and propelled forward by De La Cruz and Gosling. The diamond-tipped drill bit sank deep into the alien's skull, and when it was withdrawn, his body dropped onto the table. It shattered under his weight, and Meatman fell on his back on top of Imalash's sprawled form. Princess Lenazeth, huddled in the corner, screamed, "No! What have you done?" She pointed her ceremonial blade at the human troopers. "Out! Out!" Meatman shook his head.
I believe you have something of ours. Hand it over.
He took out his pistol and lined the sight up with the princess's center mass.
Only going to ask once, ma'am.
Princess Lenazath struggled to understand what he was speaking of. What? Oh, that. Keeping her eye stuck on the human, she fumbled along the wall of the vault before feeling the hidden drawer. She unclasped a bangle from her wrist and touched it to the drawer. It beeped and opened, releasing an acrid mildew smell into the room. Coughing, Lenazath placed it on her meal cart and gingerly pushed it towards Meatman. De La Cruz and Gosling dropped down beside their leader. They saw the yellowed sheaf of paper, which gained an orange stain along its bottom from the crushed tablet still in the cart. Gosling blinked, drawing his attention from Princess Lenazath to the documents.
Whoa! What is it?
Meatman smiled and put the documents into a plastic glass box.
This, my friend, is the compact signed by the first settlers of Vargas. The original article, no less.
He placed a protective box into his bag and zipped it shut. The labors and hardships his ancestors faced making this world livable, along with the documents commemorating their sacrifice in his possession, the hardy soldier felt little else other than pure elation.
It'll make a fine display piece in the Starfleet's museum back in the Sol system.
He squinted his eyes at the princess, whose jewelry clattered quietly with every minute movement.
Where it'll be safe, the likes of you, Zumu scum.
I hope you enjoyed that story. Click right here to watch another video with the same characters.